Boom.
This is MP Woodward, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
And I love this. I realized I talked to you all so much, Kyle Mills, Andrews and Wilson, all of you guys who write in the Clancy universe or adjacent universes, that I'm starting to confuse which conversations we've had,
How
because
dare you?
I know, no. It's just a credit to you all, because it all weaves together in a way that in my combat brain it all actually works. Here's the book, latest one, Tom Clancy, Terminal Velocity. It's a Jack Rayan Jr. book, and I'll put the link up here in a second. But no, it's a delight to be able to get to know you guys, and then um, this is a very fortunate thing for someone like me. I get to know you guys. You guys can become at least virtual friends like this, but also I'm reading my friend's book, and so I sit down, and it's better than reading someone's manuscript. I can't describe what it is, but when I'm reading your guys' work, whichever one of you it is, it's always incredible, obviously top notch. And then I'm just fascinated when my combat brain kicks in with where you guys are at with my intel. We're both intel guys. When our intel worlds collide, and I think about what it must have been like for you to sit there and write this thing. And I get a real bonus kick out of this. And so I probably didn't start explaining this very well, but it's just a real delight to read your book. And I hope that everybody else goes out and gets it. It's called Terminal Velocity. If you love Tom Clancy books, you're going to love this. Really, really, really good. Man, so good job. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for letting me read your book.
Yeah, my pleasure. And you asked, what's it like to write it? And I would say it's a lot of hard work. And getting up. I tend to write in the morning, so a lot of early hours stuff between 5 and about noon.
Yeah, that I can appreciate that. Like, I'm not a writer. I'm not a professional writer. I write for more of a hobby, and usually it's about baseball. But when I read your books, and I'm seeing all of you guys in this cadre of people that do all this incredible stuff, I am always inspired to write more about Intel because of my very specific knowledge. I'm like, oh, there's a character I could add. Your story's fine, but there's characters. I'm like, oh, I'd love to add a character like this who does something that I call them in betwinkles. Like these are little elements that inject something into the story. I'm not trying to rewrite your story. I've been critical, but it inspires me to think about this and how I might approach these things, or what does the story look like to me? And I just think it's marvelous. I get so much joy out of doing that with you all. It's a real neat thing.
Yeah, I like that. You want your stories, as an author, you want your stories to be relatable to people, however that is, right? And that might mean that, hey, I've had experience in this, and that made me feel a certain way, or brought back a certain memory. Or it could just be like, hey, I've had that emotion before too, and I know what that guy means, and that's all part of trying to make characters feel as real and scenarios feel as real as possible.
You have, in the last two novels, you've deployed really cutting edge movement vehicles. There was what I'll call a super jet ski.
Yeah,
that was fascinating to think about, if it's possible. And I think your stuff is right there on the edge of possible, or maybe just a slight reach beyond it, right? But in the spec op world, that could be a real thing. I tried out when you work adjacent with the spec op guys. Sometimes they're like, "Hey, we got a box of these high end jackets. Try it out. Let me know what you think." These kind of things happen, and you're like, "That's the best jacket of my life." Like, it's so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I just say, in Line of Demarcation, which came out back in May, I used technology that is available and is being worked on by a couple of different companies that I'm familiar with, that had to do with solid hydrogen fuel. And they're effectively electric vehicles, but then you get down to, well, how do you charge that battery? And then that ended up being solid hydrogen. And in this book, I played around with, if you think about getting an airborne operator in over a great distance, you do a hey-ho, right? A high altitude, high opening, but you can only drift so far. So I liked playing with this idea of, yeah, but what if you were in the nape of, India, Pakistan, China, somewhere where it's really difficult to fly, and you're trying to put a guy on a mountain ridge that's hundreds of miles away, and there's just no chance you can get, an Osprey or a C-17 or anything like that anywhere close to that. So, I I wanted to play around with the technological challenge of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you did it with sort of like a, if you guys might imagine like a underwater, like a machine that kind of pulls you, not a submarine, but you've seen it, like the diver holds onto it.
A swimmer delivery vehicle, yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of in that vein. Obviously, you're inside of this thing because you're way up in the air, but the hey-ho thing also, I don't know how many people know about hey-ho, but it's everybody should picture the dude who jumped out of the Red Bull thing, like up into space almost. Like that's kind of what you have to do when you do hey-ho, and you've got to get inside this very confined space because this thing can't be big. And you made me feel that claustrophobic because these are badass dudes, right? But we all try things that are new, and we are able to calm ourselves down most of the time. And I really appreciated that aspect too, where it's like it's going to be okay. I'm going to be inside this thing. It's going to be tight, and that's all right, you know. But that's the humanity that you put into these operators, so that they are forced to deal with the fact that this is uncomfortable for them.
Yeah, thank you. That's something I tried to do, is to invoke that emotion, even for a seasoned operator who in this case, in this book, they were doing something that hadn't been done before. These things weren't, you know, IOC, as we say, initial operational capability. They weren't released yet to the field. They were still in test. And so you have a guy who's a seasoned Green Beret paratrooper kind of guy, and he still has to get in this thing and think, I hope they know what the hell they're doing. And I like exploring that thought, because I think operators get put in those situations a lot, or I think it's fun to see how someone like that would react.
When you write about the deployment of those things, you put a really good hunk of words together. And obvious, that's what you do. But you know, like a cannonball into the night, the aircraft flopped, yawed, and dipped as the drag chute fell away. When I imagine doing something like this, again, this is experimental. Let me put a sidebar on this. When we mocked the people from Deep Horizon for doing something experimental and going to a hard place, this is the same game. Like these things overlap, and at least the way you presented in the story, and catastrophe is possible because you're on the absolute cutting edge of the cutting edge, you know, and it doesn't take much for something to go wrong. I mean, the amount of times that my gear got hung up on something when I was somewhere, you know, like it's just, you're always like, oh, I'm bigger than I realize. Having to go to the bathroom, this is silly, but having to go to the bathroom desperately and have all this gear on, you're like, and then you're like, I had a failure in getting my stuff off fast enough, and now I've had a failure in my pants. Like these things really happen. And we're talking about, you know, making a mess in your pants. We're not talking about hey-hoing inside of a coffin.
Well, but I think that's you know, it's part of the magic of fiction, is that you get to inhabit characters' heads and write their thoughts. And in movies, things can seem pretty simple or whatever. You see them unfolding. You don't necessarily know what the guy is feeling, particularly like the trepidation. You know, once the action starts, you can kind of get it. But I think going into the anxiety of like, I don't know how this is going to go, or like I feel like hell, like I really wish I hadn't eaten that greasy omelet before we started this, you know, all that kind of stuff.
So
you know, I'm thinking about that scene in the most recent Mission Impossible. It's an incredible scene that where he goes down and he's like, he has to get in that submarine, and then the submarine starts to like,
oh my God,
fall away. And it was one thing after another. And the whole time I was watching that, I was like, this is good writing. Like this is a writer milking the scene, you know, and it's really good stuff. But even there, you might pick up some things of what Tom Cruise's character, you know, was thinking about as he was heading into that. But in a book, you can go deeper, and it's one of the fun things of it as a form of art.
I think, gosh, was it that? I mean, obviously the water's cold. He was in the Arctic Ocean or in the very upper part of the Pacific Ocean, and there, underwater in a submarine. You know, it's just there's internal dialogue in that story, that part. It was incredible because that was right at the edge of, will I make this leap with Tom Cruise? And of course, I trust Tom, so I make the leap with him. But I also swim, and I'm like, you've been underwater a long time. It's
I know.
dark,
I know.
you know?
You definitely had to suspend disbelief for a while there, and then, as I recall, I think he came up underneath the ice, and then they saved his life just in time.
Yeah.
setting that aside, it was like just seeing that submarine move around. It was like, oh
It was
man, what
panic.
the
It was
heck's gonna
panic
happen
inducing.
now?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
amazing stuff.
yeah. That I can appreciate your desire to be able to fill those blanks in the written form, because you're right. There is all of that stuff. I also, as one of my in betweenquels, like when you want to put an operator, these are highly trained, super expensive people, and some of these guys are still in the actual service. But somewhere there's a sergeant major who's going to go, "What the fuck? Is he
Yeah.
licensed for that thing?" And some of them be like, "Oh, sir, there is no license. I'm a goddamn sergeant major. Don't call me sir." And then they start getting an argument. This whole thing happens. And then at some point, Clark's like, "They're just going to go do it. We're just going to go do it. But there is like the people that care for the operators at the highest level that are like, you're not just going to put these guys in this thing who've never flown this. Nope, not going to, they're going to have to, there's a whole argument there that happens. Now, Clark has the ability to do whatever he wants, but if it goes bad, it's all on Clark, because nobody was the ombudsman for those service members getting in that dangerous thing.
Yeah, I had fun writing Clark in this book and giving him a little bit of that pucker factor on, okay, I've really taken this on myself here, and right, I'm truly responsible for this team at this point, and this is one hairy op where I'm like depending on a lot of unproven
Yeah.
tech, and so I like that idea. And then the prior thing you were talking about around the sergeant major that disagrees, I think you always want to have, at least in my head, I think it's just more entertaining when a large bureaucracy like the Defense Department, there's always going to be conflict.
Yeah.
There's always going to be people that see things different ways. And there's just nothing less interesting in dialogue than people who just fervently agree with each other. Right. So
Yeah.
you want to have that conflict as a source of spice and to keep people interested. And you're like, as a reader, you want to sit there and go, it's got a good point there. Yeah, I can see why this guy would be mad, or like that guy's a real jackass, or that kind of thing.
Yeah. The amount of trust that the boss has to have in Clark is remarkable. And Clark is paid off all the time. Is it going to be at some point where it's just going to go sideways and Clark's going to have to go into a courtroom drama one of these books? I mean, because
it would be pretty fun. It's not a bad idea at all. It reminds me, I can't remember which of the original Tom Clancy books it was. It was like Jack Rayan wasn't the president yet. He was I don't know, the head of the CIA or something like that. But I remember he was like feeling like hell, and he was really tired out, and his wife started wondering if he's having an affair and that kind of thing. And I think that kind of stuff is really memorable. I remember enjoying that, even though it was sort of like depressing to see the hero going through this march. It's things like that make it good. And I did have in this book, I had Clark basically challenging Mary Pat Foley at some point, and they sit down and have a discussion. And she's kind of saying, "Hey, look, you shouldn't be out at the edge of the envelope that far on an operation like this that's this geopolitically sensitive." And he's basically pushing back, saying, "You need to not worry about it and not know about it." And I had fun playing with that, because again, I don't want him to always agree. I want him to have different points of view.
Yeah. And it works out, obviously, because you write books and that kind of thing, and we won't talk too much about the story, but it is powerful, and there is some conflict there. She's also placing trust, but there's also been a lot of things that have worked, and Clark isn't he's not good at being wrong. Like, he's good at being right and coming through on these things. Yeah, it's neat to see how the characters evolved. When we talked last time, we talked about the age of Clark and what you're trying to do with that, and how you sat him down. I guess it was in Turkey where he sat and was like,
Yeah,
"This is out of my hands now."
air base. Yeah.
And he still had stuff to do, and it still dealt with the bureaucracy, right? But it was a good use where he didn't have to continue to be Superman. Other people got to be Superman. It's real neat to see that.
Well, good. Thank you. Yeah, I was, I'm sensitive to the fact that, like, look, he's not a young man, and, but he's got so much experience, that I want to turn him into more of a mentor. a player coach occasionally, but more often a coach and a tactician. He's not the guy running the geopolitical strategy, but when something needs to get done, he has the tools at his disposal. I also like the idea of him handpicking the team, and so in my first Clancy book, I had him, that was Shadow State. I had him recruiting a guy named Kendrick Moore, who was a SEAL who had his pin pulled because of an action that kind of blew up in the media as I portrayed it. And so I like the idea of Clark sort of saving somebody who was in a lot of trouble because he saw value in that person. And in this book, what you'll notice is that we bring forward people who have different skills, like Bartosz, the Midas, had been in Afghanistan quite a bit. And so Clark taps him, which, we haven't done that in a junior book before. And we brought Mandy forward quite a bit as well, because she's an FBI counterterror operative. And I really I did a lot of research on the FBI and interviewed several FBI agents, learned a lot, and really enjoyed bringing that procedural aspect into this book.
Yeah, also you had a Newsbeck character who was great. He's exactly what you need, someone who didn't need to speak a lot. And is real clever. And these are kind of the in-betweenquel characters that I like. Like when I think about how I would write someone like me, you would say, hey, let's forward deploy Pete into this danger zone, because we think something's going to happen. And if there is, Pete will have built a network in the next 6 months, and I'm saying Pete in this case. It could be a Newsbeck guy, whoever it is. But yeah, that's exactly what you want. Like, where are my assets in that region so that I know how to operate because one of the things that people don't understand, and I'm glad that they don't understand, is that the Himalayas and that whole part of the world, it is so hard to physically move. I mean, I've been on patrols where every single size rock, from bigger than a house to a grain of sand, has been what I've walked on, to a mountain, like the biggest piece of rock. And it's so hard to move. Like 5 miles can be the better part of a day, and to have someone who understands that, who has the right vehicle, knows how to drive the right speed on that stuff, because I'll say it again, it's incredibly hard to move in that kind of terrain.
Yeah, I had so much fun with my Uzbek, and I wanted to portray. I also wanted it to be a little bit rusty. Like, the idea is that, hey, Bartosz had this contact, they worked together, but it's been 10 years, and that guy's since gone off and been a farmer, and Bartosz is like, no, we got a chance to go kill this bad terrorist. That dude's like, I'm on it, and he brings his old battered, Land Cruiser pickup out and that kind of thing. And to me, that's it's a little bit of a Hollywood trope, but I sort of enjoyed visualizing that.
Yeah. You also brought in a messianic figure, or a Mohammedan figure, and I love that. Did you get a chance to watch Khartoum, or any of the learn about what's his name, English? I can't even think of his name, but the guy who dies in Khartoum, when that the Mahdi. If everybody, so in the Arab world and the Islamic world, there is a resurrection scenario, sort of like Jesus, but they seem to have more of these people in modern times, and in somewhat modern times, we've had several of them. So to bring another one back tickles the modern war guy inside of me to hear that, because there are people that are like, am I the Mahdi? Is it me?
Right.
Oh,
right.
And then they're like, yes, and then they have to be all in, because you can't be half in with that scenario. And I thought you did a great job with that. And then all of the performative stuff that has to happen if you're in front of this person who's foreseen is coming. Yeah, I mean,
thank you. The idea I was playing with there was, how many wars have we seen, or terrorist movements have we seen that are about the Sunnis and the Shias? And that's going back to something that happened in the 7th century around, hey, who's the real heir to the original Muhammad? And it formed this great schism. And as I started to look into that, I found that no, there's others that you know said that have kind of a claim to the throne.
Right.
And so I wanted to play around with that idea of somebody saying, look, I'm the true Muhammad. But actually the germ of a lot of that came from, and I'll bring up a visual aid, this book, which was the original Tom Clancy Dead or Alive book, written around 2010. You can see all the notes I took in it.
Oh my gosh, heck yeah.
And he had a fictional villain called the Emir, which means prince in Arabic. But the Emir ran something called the Umayyad Council, or Umayyad Revolutionary Council. And so the idea was I wanted to resurrect that. And I took it one step further than the original Tom Clancy, in that I created his, you know, this offspring who'd been raised to believe he was the direct descendant of Muhammad. Sure. And you can imagine, like, you're telling a kid, you know, from the time he's 5 years old, who's brought up in a madrasa, how kind of nuts he's going to be. And that's, that was, I wanted to make a crazy person, basically.
Yeah. Well, and if you can talk a person into blowing themselves up for whatever reason,
exactly,
you have a chance at making a Mahdi. You really do. By the way, Chinese Gordon is the guy I was talking about. He dies at the Battle of Khartoum, and that was a Mahdiist war that was created. Yeah. So that character was fantastic, and then your other antagonist was also great, because he was, boy, you made him right there on the edge of being desirable, but broken in a way that made him undesirable. And probably didn't capture that the way I wanted to, but it was really clever. And I enjoyed whenever he was in the book, I was like, oh, I like him as a bad guy, because he is on the surface very likable, but we as the audience get to know not so likable. And it was neat to see the characters interact with him in a way that, well, one thing was really cool too, is that the ladies were able to pick up on his smarminess, and you know, it was, anyhow, just I really enjoyed that character. And you know, I hope that we get to see more characters like that, I suppose, where they are super talented, but they have these fatal flaws. This is always great characters.
Oh, good. Yeah. Writing villains is, to me, one of the first thing you have to sit down and think through. You know, you already know who your heroes are. You know them pretty well at this point. You might deploy different aspects of their personalities, but a villain you have to create pretty much every time, you know, unless it's, I guess, like in James Bond, what's it called? Hydra? Is that James Bond?
Hydra. Yeah, but that's like a big organization.
Yeah, it's like an organization, and you know, it starts to feel
Hydra, a cat in my lap.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, and it starts to feel a little bit crazy. But I think for these books, because I like to change the geography. You know, I've done South America and Vietnam, and this one, the Himalayas. And so you're like, okay, and the villains are they're going to be different people. They're going to have the relationships with, you know, the bad Russias, the Chinas, the Wagner groups, etc. But bringing them to life is kind of the first challenge, honestly, sitting down writing every one of these.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about great bad guys, and the bad guy from The Rock was played by Ed Harris. Is that who it is? And he,
The Rock, like the Alcatraz, that Rock.
Yeah. Right. Or even, gosh, was he the bad guy also in Die Hard 2? Either way, great bad guy in both cases, and not wrong. You know, like, hey, I lead these men, and you guys abandon us. You know.
Yeah.
And so
right.
That's right. I think same bad guy. I think in both cases. And very believable. And you're like, man. And then if you were just crazy, I always think about, like, we've got a demented parent in my little family here. If my brain was 10% less capable through attrition, through injury, whatever it is, could I make that leap to where, not to where I, you know, want to nuke a city or anything, but what kind of crazy things might my brain come up with that are justifiable in my brain, that has not survived aging or whatever it is. Well, and it's kind of terrifying how close, because I don't want to find out what 10% looks like versus 15 versus 25. But at some point, you can cross a threshold where sane and insane become blurred.
Yeah, one of the things that, or a piece of advice I got from my editor very early when I started in this career field, he said, I want your villains to be bad, right? And people to root against them. But I also want those same people to not agree with them, but understand why they think like what like they do. So you
Yeah.
mentioned the character Fahim, right, who was sort of
Yeah.
got hijacked into this virulent strain of Islam, and he never wanted to. You know, he's been manipulated into it. And I liked the idea of a villain who's, you know, he's vain, he's got terrible ideas, and so on and so forth. But you can kind of see how he got screwed up, you know. And I that to me that's enjoyable because it makes it more believable.
When I was reading the Fahim character, I absolutely thought about two guys that well, one I know pretty well, and the other one is I've had on the show, so I'm familiar with. But they're brothers of very, very famous people. One is Roger Clinton, and the other one is Frank Stallone. And so those guys had careers in their own right. And then once their brother's rocket ship took off, it's like a Saturn V next to a Cessna, and the Cessna just yanked along. And so no matter what they wanted to be true, I mean, it's one thing to be someone's wife and have that happen to you. But it's another thing if you're like, well, I'm just the first brother, and that's the dumbest job ever. Or, you know, my brother makes these world-class movies, and I got to go back to playing clubs because now nobody takes me seriously, even though I've got chops because Frank Stallone has great. So I thought about Fahim in that regard. It's like, no, I don't need your guys' help or things. I'm really great at this. And yeah, there would be, I don't know, there'd be a lot of emotions to sort out with. And that's, I think maybe that's why I like that character so much.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm glad to hear that. It was a fun one to write. You know, I find there's a lot of synergy in writing. I have another book coming out here in a few weeks, a military thriller. And when you're doing different things, you can start to borrow ideas from one book to the next. And so you start to learn a lot about psychology, not that you necessarily set out to, but you just do when you're researching characters. And so pretty soon you're like, you know what? When you're a little kid and your mother treats you the wrong way, or your brother does, or whatever, you are messed up, you know, and you will have all kinds of behaviors that, you know, overcome that, et cetera. And so that allows you to make more sophisticated villains who people might recognize in the real world because it's based on the way we actually work as humans.
Yeah. Speaking of villains, there's a good chance my cat is going to freak out and attack me soon. Not for any good reason other than my cat is a cat.
Like a true Dr. Evil. Yeah.
Exactly. She'll go evil on me. And who knows why, because she should be happy because she's nestled in my arms. But this is kind of funny. And so she does attack us, everybody. That'll be funny. Yeah, the evil thing and the crazy thing, all of that stuff was fantastic with that. So this is just taking the conversation in a slightly different direction, and I can't talk in too much depth about my side of this, but I meet because of my past and the people I've met and the network that I have, I end up in these crazy conversations where I'm like, wow, I can't believe I'm in this conversation. So I am in a conversation with people who are at the leading edge of drone technology. They are folks from Ukraine, and they're looking to try to, you know, get their stuff into Clark's hands, right? And I thought, man, if I really opened up my mind, this is where like you inspired me during this time. What can I do with the drone to make it mission capable for these guys? Because drones are largely invisible, you know, even like the six copters, you get them high enough up, nobody's going to hear them. And then I realized like you could put an electric warfare pod on it. You could put a listening pod, like do like, you know, signal collection, all kinds of things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that could really change anything. And also you could broadcast things, whether it was psyop type stuff, or if it was just, you know, data that was inaccurate, you know, because we're all so tied to these things. There's a real neat thing where both sides could be using drones against one another and just causing a lot of chaos, because chaos slows things down and it makes Clark uncertain or whatever it is.
Well, yeah, I think that we're watching this unfold in Ukraine right now, and it becomes this matter of there's sort of the United States Defense Department procurement policies can take a really, really long time, and they will put requirements, you know, on the defense contractors and say that drone needs to be able to survive an electromagnetic pulse and be able to pick up every frequency there is and be able to stay aloft for a super long time. And what we find in reality, I think, is that necessity is the mother of invention. And in Ukraine's case, we know that with naval surface drones, right? They strapped a Starlink antenna on these things for guidance, and just loaded a warhead and said, all right, go right up next to the Moskva and blow up. You can see these amazing videos on YouTube of them doing really, really kind of simple drone technology. So yeah, I think that is, like it or not, that's the future. I think once they become over the horizon weapons, and they lose, if communications were to go down, then I think artificial intelligence is going to be much more involved in the drones making their own decisions, which is kind of a scary Terminator world. And I mean, if you don't mind, this is I have this book coming out called Red Tide.
Cool.
A novel of the next Pacific War. It comes out September 23rd, so relatively soon. And that is one of the major themes of the book, is that, in a war against China, when the two fleets get blinded right off the bat because satellites get blown up, they start to, on the one hand, they start to rely on old-fashioned technology. On the other, they start just innovating to say, hey, how do we come up with naval drones that can go thousands of miles and things like that. So playing around with all those themes in that book.
Yeah, and sometimes the drone needs to only have one job, whatever that job is. It could be simple. And so you could even say, I'm going to make a mechanical drone. It's not going to be reliant on any electrical energy. It's going to run on a gas engine. It's going to carry a gas tank. It'll fly faster the further it goes. I can pre-program in a direction. I don't need it to get close. I just need it to scare people.
Honestly, I think the military applications for drone technology are kind of endless. And it'll be like everything else, though, where as soon as there's a good offense, then there's innovation for a good defense. So, I think drones that rely on radio communications to make decisions. All right, well, we're immediately going to blind those radio communications, right? Or we are going to electromagnetic pulse them, or, we've seen, is it Anduril, the technologies? There was a contest actually that a Canadian team won, where they said, hey, come up with a drone defense. And they used sound waves. And they said, look, if you didn't just pump out sound waves with a certain intensity, you can basically obliterate this thing, so directed energy weapons effectively. I think we will see a tremendous amount of innovation there. So yeah, it's kind of a whole new arms race, but in a different lower level tactical level, I suppose.
Yeah, and again, like, these things can be simple. They can do one simple job, just like having a spoof drone that gets close and tries to use proximity to crack some kind of.
Yeah, you could fake out whole. You could have a whole fake armies marching.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Whatever that thing is, and so it's not just interdict; it's broadcast. It's all these different angles you can come at it from. It's pretty remarkable to think about. Just, anything. How about a drone that just goes and gobbles up all your Wi-Fi? You would never suspect that 500 feet above you is this thing, and it's just got 500 cell phones on it, or whatever the means is. Yeah. And it's just like gulp, 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 and just gulps up all your Wi-Fi, and you are now you're black on comms because you can't. And nobody's going to be like, well, what's wrong with the router? Like, it looks like something's eating up all of our Wi-Fi, and you, for that time, you'd be blacked out, and then whatever happens after that, that's crazy to think about. That's something, because like here, I turn my phone. We have good Wi-Fi. At least we used to have good Wi-Fi. It's brand new, like high quality, right? But now I take my phone off the Wi-Fi network before I do my shows, because that little bit might be the difference between a clear show and a not so clear show. Like, this isn't combat. This is just a stupid break it down show.
At the other end of the spectrum, I mean, I think it calls into question when will we have. Why do we have manned airborne systems? So I do these little video snippets. They're about 2 minutes long, these briefings that I call the author's arsenal, and put out on my X channel and my YouTube channel and stuff like that. And basically I just make little videos for things that I found in the course of research for my books. And so the one I just did was on Chinese amphibious invasion capabilities, and they just launched a destroyer, or an amphibious assault ship that is like a mini aircraft carrier, kind of like we have LHAs and LHDs, and this has catapults. And so there's this great speculation. Okay, well, why does it have catapults? You know, our LHAs have vertical takeoff and landing for F-35s and Ospreys and helicopters. They have catapults, and the thinking is that because they have this drone, and you see this drone, man, and it's like, it looks like a flying Dorito, you know, but it is basically it's basically an aircraft carrier with attack drones that are meant to go in swarms and overwhelm air defenses so that then helicopters can come through, et cetera.
Sure.
And I think that is going to be, I think we'll have that high end sort of more strategic level of drone warfare. And then the lower end that you're talking about, where they're very ad hoc and task directed and cheap, you know, you can
cheap,
right. Yeah. And I think one of the big criticisms of the Defense Department right now, or our current strategy as it exists with current weapon system, is, you know, are we really going to fire a $5 million missile at a you know, $800 drone, right? That's going to exhaust capabilities super quickly. So all of this is going to take a lot of rethinking.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And when you want to try to, I mean, something as simple as a thing called a Raven, everybody, and basically it goes in your backpack, and it looks like a kid's toy. It's like a styrofoam airplane with a motor on it, and then it just goes out, and it's got a camera and a motor, and it's just out there to be out in front of you, and you can see what you could never see before. No one's going to hear it. The motor is the quietest little thing. And then when you tell it to come home, it just comes right back to you, and it dunk falls into the ground. The wings fall off. You pack it up, throw it in your backpack, and you're on your way. Just that little insignificant thing is highly tactical, but it gives you vision in a way like, is there a guy behind that building? Well, the Raven is already up. Let's see what it does. And none of this is classified. This is all open stuff, you know, and it's an amazing tool to see around buildings, see around corners. If you have the right kind of camera, see through walls. And that is nothing. Like, that's just one little tiny, you know, spot of land on this giant landscape.
Isn't it funny though how the more things change, the more they remain the same? Because I remember reading at some point about the hot air balloon being like, hey, in the Civil War, like, finally we can get some airborne reconnaissance here, see what the hell's going on, right?
Yeah.
And then you get to World War I, and I remember reading that when they had biplanes, and they're like, before they ever thought about putting guns on them or anything like that, they were like, no, this is basically just so we can fly over the trenches and see what the hell's happening, right? And I think the very first like German and British encounter, or maybe German and French encounter, they like waved at each other, you know, like they hadn't thought about fighting each other yet. So here we are now with the next version of, you know, handheld pocket airplanes that we can use for immediate reconnaissance, a battlefield need that never goes away.
Jack Rayan is a complicated dude. He is, well, he's, first off, and I talk about this concept in a lot of my work, he's an alpha amongst alphas, right? And this is how all special op teams are. You know, everybody wants to outshoot the Bravo on a ODA. And so he's one of these guys. And how does he learn to switch it off? And does he get that from his mom, or does he get that from his dad, do you think?
Well, I think he's conflicted because his dad is really a kind of an intellectual. You know, his dad was a PhD in history and an investor in a private equity company. And so I like to play around with Jack Jr., trying to be successful in his own right in this private equity firm called Henley Associates. So he's got that going on in his life, but he's been brought up around people like Ding Chavez and John Clark and, you know, a bunch of other operators. And he likes to be aggressive and participate in those things. And I think he got a taste of it. Really, the first time you get a taste of it was in that book I mentioned, Dead or Alive. And so I think those are the sort of the two sides of his action and intellect. And what I like playing around with is the idea that, hey, as he's aging, you know, and now he's in his mid-30s or whatever, he's not always, you can't just think like I'm the single guy. I like to have him think, okay, maybe I'm leading a team here, or maybe my value is higher if I hang back and direct things as opposed to going myself. So that's a conflict that I tried to exploit in this book a bit.
Yeah, you did a great job too. this is not a spoiler for anybody. In the last book, Ding Chavez gets injured, and
Yeah.
he is still recovering in this book. And so that bit of reality, I appreciated that because, like, I used to read those Star Wars books, and it was like every episode, Luke Skywalker would like, oh, and he sprained his ankle, and now he can't participate in this novel. There was always because you have this Superman in there, and they always had to lame Superman to get him in there. But this is a little more realistic, where it's like, yeah, I've got to, remember, like I've got to rebuild my ankle. Like that took me almost a year to get my ankle to where it was walkable, and that's just reality, right? And so I like that. I also like the fact that Clark's leadership is not just about we're going to push hard and accomplish the mission. He also comes back around and takes care of his folks, and you,
Yeah.
you deal with that at the end of the book. And I like that a lot because I've been the guy who is the guy that you rely on to do these things. And then I'm like, where's my advocate for my career? Oh, there isn't one. And then you realize like, hey, this is all me. And if I leave, they'll be fine because nobody really cares about me, even if I'm doing a great job. And that was part of the reason why I got away from all this work was I got tired of living in this threat space and I got tired of like, being ignored because I was so far deployed that like my peers who worked the same job had the same code, whatever, they're like, oh, this guy's great. And I'm like, yeah, that guy's at the office. I think he's at the office. Of course you're going to give him the highest bonus because he's right there. What
Hmm.
about the dude you can't even be close enough to evaluate because he's so far deployed? And I thought Clark took care of those guys in a way that for me like really touched my heart in a positive way, even though these are fictional characters. But there aren't enough guys who do that, who say, hey, this is incredible what you guys are doing. Here's what we're going to do about it.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That was important to me because I don't want, it's called the campus, right? And it's these guys who there's an affiliation of them where they have special skills and so on,
Hmm.
and they're kind of a cross-functional team, and they come together for a mission when it's the right thing. But I think that as I thought about that, and I've kind of made Clark the de facto leader of that team, and he briefs everybody in, he goes out and puts his neck out there, and so he does the thing that good leaders do. But he would also be a good leader, as it seems to me, and he would as a military person, right, as
Hmm.
somebody who was a career military officer, who would recognize, I need to take care of the morale of these guys. I need to build some esprit de corps. I should be able to sense when somebody who's critical to the mission is feeling like he's getting cheated and make him feel. So I have him do that with the ODA guy, Kerry Marks, who's a little disgruntled because he's not getting promoted because he's been going off on these secret missions so often that his unit is going, dude, you're always, TDY. What do you want us to do? And he's going, I'm off saving the world. Right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring in a little of that practical reality of how a military leader would really think about it. And I don't know, as I wrote it, it sort of warmed my heart to Clark that he would perceive those things and think about those things. And if in that scene, not to provide a big spoiler, but he basically prompts the leader of the company, Jerry Henley, to, yeah, hey, you need to start recognizing these guys more. And I've been in business, I've been in the military, like, yeah, I've certainly seen that happen, and I wanted to kind of make that real for readers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you did a good job of that. And again, like you look at what these guys are being asked to do, and the ladies too. It's impossible, and they're always in this dangerous spot. And it's like, hey, that's great, you guys did a good job. Oh, by the way, we need you again. And you're like, hey, slow down for a second.
Yeah, yeah,
When
and
do I get to be part of this investment firm, or whatever?
I think it can be too trite to just be like, okay, and then everybody dined at the White House, like,
Right. Yeah.
right. And so I wanted to get something where it's like, no. I wanted readers to envision that, yeah, when these guys are off duty, they still hang out. There's camaraderie there.
Hmm.
There's trust. There's mutual respect. Because how else would they perform well as a unit? Like
Yeah.
that. So I definitely wanted to build that, and I tried to build in character arcs too, such that some of the characters, not Clark would have already understood that, but like Mandy, the FBI agent, she starts off a little bit cocksure, a little bit arrogant, thinks that she knows exactly how to do this, and she's teamed up with Gavin, and I think by the end of the book has a more appreciation for other people's skills and a little more humility.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's that seasoning that we all go through, as you go through more missions. When you're young, you're like, man, it's hot outside. Yeah, we all know. We're all out here. We're all walking in the heat. We don't talk about it because we all know we're all out here. We're all walking in the heat. And so they're like, you don't need to state the obvious anymore. But these are the kind of things that you learn over time, where you harden yourself to certain things. Yes, I'm going to get into this box, and yes, it's going to be all compressed, and yes, it's going to be uncomfortable, but I'm going to believe. And then also, when they open that back door for that airplane and you go whipping out the back, there is no hesitation. You already decided they're going, because there's no time for hesitation, because the next person is right behind you, because that's how you deploy. Those kind of things that you get right, man. I love that, because
Oh, I
there
appreciate
is
that.
a requirement.
Thank you.
Yeah. 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 It's you don't get to mess around with the trivial things. You have to just focus on your job. And then whatever it takes you to do that, those are the details that I think that are rich in what you do.
Thank you. And I do try to imagine that as you inhabit the heads of these characters, you're like, all right, this guy's a sergeant first class. He's been in for nearly 20 years. He's been, in a Green Beret. He's qualified and served in ODA as a Green Beret, and there's a certain there is a certain, like, yeah, I'm just got to kind of embrace the suck here and deal with it. It's the mission. That doesn't make them inhuman, right? So you still want them to have maybe a little quiet anxiety, like maybe a little bit of like, okay, I hope we know what we're doing. Has this been thought out really, really well? But you're still going to get up and get after it because you're a professional.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, boy, it brings up a lot of like memories for me, and trying to figure out how to figure out what I need to do, and yeah, the machine pulls you back a lot, right? And so you can be as hard charging as you want, and read all the books and take all the courses, but there's always this just drone chute hanging off the back of your career, and it impacts you, and you think, well, I'm not going to trust the people above me until they earn it. And then you become something that's not quite as capable. So you have to, it's really hard to explain what I'm trying to explain, but you have to balance this experience with what's out there with your professional ability to do your job. And it's really tough to balance those things, especially as your friends are all getting divorced or, getting traumatic brain injuries. And you're just in this very uncomfortable spot. And again, like with the way you write, a lot of that stuff is in there, and it's great because it lends that credibility. Look, military stuff obviously from your earlier career, but you've also just done a good job of putting some of that special operations humanity in there. And in this case, I'm putting myself into that world, because when you're a field spy, you work in a space that's very similar. I don't give us tabs and shit, but we I still have to go out and adapt to every environment that I'm in. And I have no time for anything behind me or above me. I just have to live in that space. And that's not easy to lead. There's no way to lead me effectively. I can be critical for not being led effectively, but there's no way to allow me to go do what I need to do that only I can do, and still, I don't know, stay in front of me. It's just really tough to do.
Yeah, I tried to give a bit of a personality. You have Clark, who's aging and needs to take care of his troops, right? Then you had Kendrick Moore, the SEAL who had been bounced, and his in this book, he's sort of rehabilitated and has a new lease on life, and you can feel his energy and drive. Then you have Carrie Marks, who's a sergeant first class, who's annoyed that he's not getting up for promotion and is starting to question things, and he's comparing that to a new character named Tom Buck, a Marine.
Right.
A Marine Raider, who, from Carrie Marks's point of view, is like, dude, you haven't seen enough yet, right, to be the least bit jaundiced. And in some respects, there's a little bit of envy coming through Carrie Marks there, and that here's a guy who's younger, gets to do it all over again, doesn't know how hard this might get, and is all enthusiasm. And so, but I liked the idea of him coming to just appreciate that that's okay, that they can be in different spots and still work together as professionals.
I'm going to hold up this book again so you guys can. We've been talking a lot about it, and we haven't talked about like really any of the storyline. There's a whole another part of the story I've not even discussed. So you guys should know this thing is, it's a fast read. If you read like you like Clancy books or someone in your family does, get this thing. It's called Terminal Velocity. They're the words right there. And you know what I always say, buy two and buddy read because books make great gifts. What I'll do with this book is either leave it at the cabin that our family has and I have access to sometimes, or I will give it to somebody to hopefully spark their interest in getting back into the Clancy world. That's usually what I do instead of keeping them around, because then I'd rather have a book out in the flow than sitting on my wall taking up more space. I'm not a library guy anymore, but it's a really fantastic book, man. I appreciate it, and I can't wait for the next one.
Thank you. It's funny that you say that about getting books out in the wild, because my wife actually suggested this. The paperback edition comes out eventually, right? And so
Right.
for my book Shadow State, the paperback edition came, and the publisher will send you like 30 paperbacks. And I'm like, what do I do with all these?
Yeah.
And then, so they kind of sat around for a few weeks. And then my wife was like, why don't we donate these? And so we went around to libraries and book fairs and things like that here in the Seattle area and gave them away. And they were so grateful. And I was like, wow, okay, cool. That's a nice thing to do. It's nice to just, I want reading to be popular. I want this to be to be something that people do. I want this, I want to be successful as an author, certainly, but I want the whole genre to be successful. And so it's great that you do that, and awesome to get these things out there.
Yeah. I was noticing that you have a series called The Handler, and if you've got a couple minutes, I'd love to talk about that, because this is more of like, I love the special operations side, and I always want to insert a character like me in the story because I want to be a hero in my own story. But the Handler, tell me about that. Is there more of my kind of guy in there, or is this something different?
Yeah. So the Handler came out in 2022,
Okay.
and is about a kind of disaffected ground branch operator who had been who had been in the military as an intelligence officer, but he hadn't been in special ops until he joined the CIA and then worked to get over to the ground branch side. And while in the CIA, he met his wife, who is a case officer. And between the two of them, they get married. But then, that being a very difficult lifestyle, they also get divorced. And in The Handler, they're forced to work together again. And so the title is actually meant as something of a double meaning, in that yes, she's being the case officer and handling an asset, but she's also kind of handling him, And so he goes on a mission into Iran to get an asset out that he had dealt with some years before, and is not happy to be working for his ex-wife.
Right. And then Red Tide is the other book that you have coming out. Is that right?
Yeah. So Red Tide, I have one here. Is that comes out in just a couple weeks, September 23rd.
Okay.
That's from the Naval Institute Press, who was the first publishers of The Hunt for October. And so
no kidding.
Yeah, so it is. It's a lot more like Red Storm Rising. So military fiction centered around a family, a naval family, and there's effectively a naval war between the U.S. and China, and it's of all things, it's sparked by a trade war. And so I wrote this a while ago too, which is kind of the amazing thing, but it's sparked by a trade war, and that leads to a competition over chip production in Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
And I was an executive for a Taiwanese company for a while, so know a fair about that. And eventually that leads China to take some more aggressive actions, and it's not a classic invasion scenario. So think, and what ends up happening is a large naval battle that is akin kind of to the Battle of Midway.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. So, and that book, and the link for that book is right here on the screen now. Ding, ding, ding. And then there's The Handler. Ding, ding, ding. If you want to read that. And then, of course, Terminal Velocity, the book that we're talking about today. Hey, look, you guys know how to do this. I put the links up there mostly because I get a couple of cents when you buy them, if you buy them that way. But either way, just type in MP's name. There's only so many MPs out there, and you'll be able to get the book. And I'm delighted by them. So if you guys are delighted by the things that I'm delighted by, get one. And if you're not, get one. I don't care. Just support these authors who do this incredible stuff, because I don't watch a lot of TV anymore. I do a lot more reading, partly because of the show. And I just bang for bang, dollar for dollar, page for page. I think books are better than a lot of movies. And so often in movies, I hate to be honest about this, but I get disappointed. They follow, the books are formulaic, but not in the way that movies are. And so I'm not talking bad about movies. I'm just saying dollar for dollar, man, a book, hours and hours of entertainment, and then you can give it to somebody else, and hopefully their eyes light up. And if they don't read it, no harm, no foul. I gave a book to Bruce Trampler, who's a Hall of Fame fight maker for Top Rank Boxing. It's like a legend. And I'm like, oh, I had a bunch of books in my car. I'm like, I got the perfect book for this guy. Gave it to him, and he's like, wait, did you write this? And I'm like, no, I know the guy that wrote it, but you should read it because I think it's great. And he's like, well, if you said it's great, I'm going to read it. And he sent me a text. He's like, I'm reading that book. I love it. And so those opportunities happen when we put books back out into the wild.
Couldn't agree more. And I would love to see the popularity of reading rise once again. I think it's good. I think it's good for people's brains, and I think it's overall good for society, because you can get more complex ideas out there and more thought provoking plots than you can in a squeezed into a 2-hour movie.
Are you going to continue writing Jack Rayan books for a while?
I am. So I would expect one, so there were 2 this year, which was a lot. I would expect one in 2026, and then I have 2 other books that will come out in 2026 as well. So 25 was 3 books, and 26 will be 3 books too.
Jesus, man.
I know it's been busy. It's been really busy. I have severe, like, carpal tunnel forming, all kinds of stuff, right? I'm trying to get ergonomic keyboards, whatever. But I love doing it. It doesn't feel like a job. It's just a great time.
Yeah. You get to write, right? And that's
it's a privilege
to do it. Yeah. Anything in closing for you? And thanks again for coming on and entertaining all my ridiculousness. And it's just it really is. I started with this. It is a delight to know all you guys and try to have these incredible conversations. And I hope folks can appreciate just how fortunate we all are that this era of time where we can sit down with people writing cutting edge stuff. It's so neat. And so again, thanks for you. And then anything you want to say, we'll wrap it up after that.
No, it's an honor to be on, Pete. Thanks for promoting the books and the genre in general. And I love the Break It Down podcast.
Yeah, I love it. All right, everybody, I'll see you all tomorrow. And MP, I'll say goodbye to you in a second. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, folks.